Welcome to 517 EdTech's Digital Instruction Network Session 2. We're going to get into screencasting, like what it is and why you'd want to do it, because really the manner in which you screencast is going to be dependent on the goals you have for it. Now, that pretty much is true for everything all the time, but I'm going to hit that point a little bit harder today. Screencasting, the different tools you could use. We're going to get into some pros and cons and some requirements. We're going to talk about sharing that video file that you create, which is going to sort of be dependent on the tool that you use. And then we're going to talk about some best practices, okay? And then we'll do Q&A throughout, okay? All right. In general, anytime you are creating a video, that includes your computer screen, that's screencasting, okay? And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the screencasting thing, okay? And there's an example in there in the slides if you want to click on it. I think that's me doing that. But like basically anytime that you get that maneuver where you got the screen going and your little face in the corner, that's screencasting, okay? Now, with this presentation today, I'm going to kind of encourage you to not think of yourself as an online instructor. I want you to think of yourself as a podcaster or a YouTuber, okay? Now, if you don't have youngsters at home with you, or you did, and it's been a while since they've been at home with you, you may not be familiar with the genre of entertainer called podcaster, or well, podcast you probably are, but YouTuber. YouTuber is something that seems to be catching on a little bit more with youngsters than it does with grownups, largely because grownups are not in a position to sit and watch their computer screens nearly as often. But anyway, so the YouTuber generally is somebody who's screencasting or combining some version of screencasting with like recording themselves with their phone or something, okay, and producing videos that are usually there for entertainment value. And there's a way that you can make money doing this with ad revenue and things like that, okay? But their model is dependent on getting clicks and people watching and sharing their videos. So it's a high entertainment model. The reason I want you to think about that is there's a bit of a difference when you are producing things to be consumed by youngsters through a screen. They're used to a certain type of content coming at them through that screen. And that tends to be high energy. It tends to be fairly fast-paced, okay? Not insanely fast-paced, but fairly fast-paced. It tends to be engaging and put out in such a way that they are wanting to watch it. Okay, this is a little different than what most of us are doing when we record instructional videos. Okay, instructional videos usually carry the air of the content that we're presenting. Okay, so by that I mean if your content is math, let's suppose, and I taught high school math, so I'm okay talking a little bit of straight talk about high school math. If you're teaching a section on how to plot points, and you record a 12-minute screencast on that, there's a very good chance that content is not going to carry your screencast as far as engagement value. Okay, you're going to have to bring something else to the table. Your audience isn't as captive as you want them to be. You can put them in a position where the expectation is that they open up the video and watch it. You can't control very easily their attention while they're watching it because they're not with you. They may have other tabs open. There may be more interesting things going on. They may have the dog sitting beside them. They may be watching the video while they're eating their lunch. Okay, you don't have the opportunity to control all this stuff. So you have to think differently when you turn the camera on because the engagement equation changes. The variables change. In a classroom, you can control that differently because you've got an audience that can't as easily get up and leave. You're using your personality differently. You've got relationships with those students. You can move around the room. There's all these little tricks and tips we have to keep our kids engaged, and most of those don't work in a screencasting setting. So you've got to kind of be prepared to re-engage those students using the medium you're in, not expecting the old tricks that you have to work the same way. Okay, All right. So here's the question. Why would you make one of these? Okay. A lot of us are having to do synchronous instruction with our students virtually using Zoom or using Google Meet. Okay. Why would you bother making screencasts? Well, there's a couple reasons, I think. First of all, sometimes it's easier to teach when your students are not in front of you. Okay. And I don't mean that like, it sounds like I'm saying this school would be a great place if it wasn't for all these kids, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that sometimes with these Zoom sessions, there's a lot going on. And so you've got kids whose internet's making them kind of flicker in and out. You've got students who you're getting distracted by maybe what you're seeing going on around them in their video cameras and video feeds. You got a chat that you're managing. It can be a little tricky at times, especially early in the game while you're still kind of getting used to this. And so if you record your direct instruction stuff in a screencast form, now you've got that resource that lives on. And now you've got the opportunity to flip your class, or you've got the opportunity to have a resource that lives for students who weren't able to make it to the synchronous session, or you've got options now with a resource that stands on its own that you don't have to worry about giving at a time when you're juggling all these other things. Okay. And then also you've got something there that can be used as a teaching tool. Okay. And so trying to remember where during the 45-minute conversation plus engagement tools plus direct instruction plus intro level relationship building, like where in the course of that 45-minute Zoom call that was recorded, the part that your student should rewatch because they missed that section on the formative assessment at the end, like trying to have that interaction can be a little tricky. Like, okay, I want you to go into yesterday's video and watch from like minute 21 to 29. Like that's hard for them to do. That's hard for you to do. That's a low, I think, a low value kind of move when it comes to using that standalone resource as a reteach mechanism. You're more likely to just bring those kids into a small group and reteach them, which may be a good thing to do. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do. I'm saying, though, that if you take your teachable units and break them into like 6 to 8 minute chunks so that those videos exist, now you can say, oh, you missed this section on the formative assessment. Here, go watch this video. It's unit 1, lesson 1, but it's part 2 of that. And that's where, and then they'll just have a little video to watch. You can send them right to that one and they've got something to see. Also, you still have the option, or excuse me, the reality of not all your students going to be able to be at all of your live sessions. This has never not been true, by the way. There's always absent students, even when we were in school, the way we used to remember it. There were always absent students. So, having a copy of the direct instruction as you delivered it for those students to watch after the fact is probably something that would be really, really valuable even beyond COVID. Okay. So we want to talk about how we're going to pull this move off. Okay. Now I'm going to get into some best practices, but really screencasting is 3 things. Okay. It's 3 things. The first thing is the why. Like, why are you doing this? What's the goal you're trying to accomplish? What is it you're hoping to achieve with this thing? Okay. And it could be instruction. I'm going to focus on instruction today, but instruction is not the only goal. Okay. Just like you don't interact with your students all the time, hoping that you're going to teach them content, right? That's most of your interactions, but it's not all of them. There's relationship building. There's engagement. There's other random things. I mean, when I taught, sometimes you're interacting with students and you have a question of the week kind of thing. And there's a little gimmicks and contests and things that you do in your classroom. I mean, we all have these things. Screencasting can fit neatly into that category. Okay. So let's suppose that you do a lot of your instruction live, and that's okay. That's a good thing to do. But let's suppose also, though, that you provide a Monday morning message, and it's got some fun name, and it's like a podcast that you do. And every Monday morning it's there, and there's always some kind of gimmick. Okay, so let's suppose that you I don't know, like to cook. And every week you're going to highlight a thing you made. You're going to make a thing on Thursday or Wednesday, sometime throughout the week for dinner. You're going to try a thing. And during that try, you're going to have either the product or the story to tell, or you're going to screencast yourself while you make it, looking through the recipe. I mean, I don't know. That may not be a great example. I'm just saying, like, think of things that you can do that provide value to your class for the number of different goals that you have to accomplish, and what you could do to use the screencasting tool to drive students toward your Google Classroom. Drive them to want to watch your videos, okay? I know one group of teachers that I knew of that were going to co-teach, and those teachers were going to have the bulletin board behind them in the way that, like, one of the teachers on this call I saw had, like, some words kind of put on her fireplace, and that's what was behind her, and that's her backdrop, right? It's a very strategic backdrop. It's simple, but it's got the words on it. It allows her to frame her instruction, okay? What they were going to do is have corresponding objects hanging over their shoulders, okay? And it might be, I don't know, a baseball cap. Each of them has a baseball cap. And then they're going to switch it. It's going to be a scarf or a snow shovel or a mitten or something. I don't know. But they were going to use that as a way for the kids to, like, that's going to be part of the theme of the week. And it's going to be really the subtle thing. They're working with high schoolers, and it's going to be this curious kind of wonder. But they're using that to drive, like, the students will want to watch the podcasts, want to watch the screencasts because of that element. And it can be difficult at times to tell just what that thing is going to be. And I'll talk about this when I get into editing, because there's a story that a colleague of mine tells, and it's just awesome. She tells it better than me, but I'm gonna give it a shot. So anyway, so it's those things, right? The three things. The first thing is the purpose. We talked about that. The second thing is the tool. Okay, you're gonna have to use a tool of some kind. So let's talk a little bit about the tools. Okay, I left one off this list. I actually left two off this list because things have changed a little bit since I last gave the presentation. But in my opinion, there's really 5 tools that are present as decent options when it comes to screencasting. Okay, your mobile device is one of them. Okay, this is not a bad tool when it comes to recording yourself, particularly if you don't need your screen. So this is technically like I'm not properly screencasting if I use my phone, but if you're gonna go outside on location, as they say. If you were to, like, as it's fall and the leaves start changing colors, perhaps your Monday morning message is going to be recorded under that big oak tree in your yard, and you're going to want to get out of your office a little bit to do it. Okay, your mobile device now becomes the device you're using just to record that quick video. Okay, Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, and Loom, to me, all kind of fit in the same category. Okay. They function a little differently. Screencastify is a Chrome extension. Screencast-O-Matic is a web application that will install on your computer, and Loom is the same kind of thing as Screencast-O-Matic. And they're all mostly the same. They're a little different. They each have their own little quirks. Loom, the picture in the bottom is a circle instead of a square shape, and Screencastify is a Chrome extension, so it works really nicely on Chromebooks if you're going to use that. Screencast-O-Matic is the one that boasts the longest record time. I think Screencast-O-Matic's free version gives you 45 minutes of record time. So it's like, you've got pros and cons to each of those, but they're all basically the same. They're freemium meaning there's screencasting tools that have a free version. And then if you're willing to pay, you can get a more robust paid premium version. But they install a little differently and they work a little differently, but they all integrate fairly well with your Google Drive. And getting the videos into the Google Drive is like the next step toward getting them into your Google Classroom. They've all got some cheap and easy editing tools that don't do a ton, but do some stuff, and they all take some practice to get the hang of. So in general, I would, depending on the needs that you have for those tools, you may choose one versus another. I do know that some districts are purchasing premium versions of those tools. So obviously, if your district has endorsed a single one of those tools by buying the premium version of that, you'll want to give that one the best shot you can before you move on to a different one, because you'll have people all over your community using those tools. So in addition to having the premium access, you'll have people around you that know how to use them well. And those are people that you can ask questions to and stuff like that. So the first piece is to pick a tool. There's, like I was saying before, there's pros and cons to these things. Your phone, you know, the pro of your phone is that it's super versatile. You're probably really familiar with most of its functions. And of course, it's very mobile, so that if you need to like get out of your office and record something someplace else, you can do that. Okay. The cons of usually are things like video quality, and sometimes, depending on the type of phone you have, working with the video after the fact can be kind of a challenge. Okay, so like iPhones record in a certain file type. Androids record in a certain file type. You know, can certain things open those up? How are you going to post them? That kind of stuff is usually what phones get where it gets a little tricky sometimes. Only sometimes. Screencastify is easy. Like, actually, Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, and Loom, in my opinion, are all easy tools to use. I don't say that. I know I say that sounding like the tech guy who knows how to use a lot of tools, but like those ones are fairly easy to pick up, in my opinion. There's a very predictable result. They're very stable. They're consistent. They do what they do, and they don't do a ton, but what they do consistently. And they're free. Well, they have free versions. Okay, Screencastify does not have a ton of editing capability, which is actually kind of a good thing. And they have a 5-minute max as far as the time goes, unless your district has purchased the premium version or you have access to the premium version. Screencast-O-Matic and Loom give you longer record times, which is kind of a double-edged sword. So, and more on that in a minute. But those tools are also, once again, you see the same pros for Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, and Loom. Those, in my opinion, they're just not very difficult tools to pick up and learn how to use. So that's a good thing. Now, Camtasia is a tool from TechSmith, and TechSmith is a local vendor who produces all kinds of different kind of software. Camtasia is a nice product, and you can get a trial version of it from their website so that you can mess around with it a little bit. The problem I have with Camtasia is that it is a professional quality recording and editing software. It installs on your computer, which means it will not work on an iPad and it will not work on a Chromebook. But if you have a laptop or you have a Mac, it will install. But it is very robust. It does all sorts of cool stuff. Camtasia is a tool that does a whole lot of different things, got a lot of editing capabilities, multi-track recording, transitions. I mean, you can do all kinds of cool things, but it's going to take you a while to learn how to do all that stuff, as opposed to the other three tools, Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, or Loom, that you'll be able to pick up very, very quickly, but you can't do a whole lot with them. So I record all of my videos on Camtasia, but I've been messing around with Camtasia for 5.5 years now. So I've learned how to do everything over time. So it's like, I like Camtasia, and I think it's a really, really robust tool. But I also think that if you're dealing with a scenario where you've got a lot to do in a short amount of time, that's probably not your best bet, because the learning curve on that tends to be the steepest of the tools. Okay, now the next piece of this, though, is how are you going to actually get the tool consumed by the students? Okay, now there's a couple options here that you could do. The first is Google Drive, the Google Drive, Google Classroom bit. Now, most of the tools that you're going to use will put a video in Google Drive. Okay, Screencast-O-Matic, Loom, Screencastify will all put a video in Google Drive. Camtasia puts a video in Google Drive. Your phone, if you install the app on Google Drive, will record. That'll dump a video into Google Drive. Okay. The trick is, though, will the students be able to play the video? Okay. And you would want to test that. most of our students are probably connecting on Chromebooks. So that's something that you can test. And just make sure that the video file you have plays. If it's Google, if it's Loom, if it's Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, it's going to play fine. If it's Camtasia, it'll play fine. If it's from your phone, it probably will play fine. And the reason I say probably is that like that Apple file type they record in at times from an iPhone certain devices in certain circumstances sometimes will give it a little bit of trouble. So you just would want to test it with one. Take a video that's small and cheesy. It doesn't take you very long. Upload it into the Google Drive app. Post it to your Google Classroom and say to your students, hey, will you guys try and open this up real quick? I had a cool weekend and I want to share a story with you. And just see if they can play it. And if they start saying, oh, Ms. Velo, the video won't play. Oh, Mrs. Fox, the video won't play. And then you know that you're just going to need a new plan. And that's a cheap and easy way to test whether that's going to work. So you'd want to test that. YouTube is one of my favorite places to post videos because you don't have to worry about that problem. Okay, everyone knows how to use it, really. I mean, people are using YouTube to change flat tires and replace their ceiling fans and cook recipes and train their dogs. I mean, like people are using YouTube for everything. And so right now there's a high degree of market incentive for all devices to play YouTube videos. And you've got a high degree of probability that your target audience is familiar with the functions of YouTube, how to stop a video, how to start a video, how to access a video, how to save a video, how to bookmark things. Like that's all stuff that a lot of your target audience is going to be doing already anyway. So that's a useful spot. Plus you get the closed captioning, which is no small matter. Okay. Particularly if we're talking about universal access. Okay. So YouTube does a nice job with its auto captions. The issues, the yeah buts with YouTube are, first of all, if you're going to record things and students are going to be in them, you're going to have to do some editing to fix that. Either blur their faces out or chop out the bits where the students show up, or there's going to have to be some issue. You're going to have to deal with that somehow, some way. Another thing is if your school does not give you a YouTube channel, then you're going to need to deal with that issue. You're going to be posting videos to your personal YouTube channel. If you already use your personal YouTube channel for things, there might be a conflict there. So it's like some of that stuff you're going to want to think about. You know, like if you're a guitarist maybe and you post guitar lessons on your personal YouTube channel and you're monetizing that stuff, right? You wouldn't want to like post your educational videos there thinking that you're attempting to use your educational videos as a driver to drive traffic to your private monetized YouTube account, right? So there's those types of little things that you got to kind of think about. Now, most districts that I know of are giving their teachers YouTube channels. That's part of the Google Suite. So your G Suite will give you access to all the Google tools and some of the other stuff, Jamboard and Meet and those things. But also they'll probably be giving you a YouTube channel. If they don't, or if you don't know if they are, reach out to your IT people and see if you can get some clarification on that. Also, there's other ways of pushing this as well, depending on what you're trying to do. You could dump stuff into Edpuzzle and create Edpuzzle videos with your own recordings. That's a thing. And it's not a bad structure either. Edpuzzle is a nice tool. Basically, if you're not familiar, Edpuzzle is a way to take video files and chop them into bits so that there's questions that the students are asked to do throughout. So maybe in your instructional video, you pause every 60 seconds and ask a formative assessment type question to have the students think through something as an opportunity to respond. Not a bad strategy. If you were doing that, you would skip all this other stuff and you would upload a video, probably from your Google Drive, into Edpuzzle. And then you would use that, you'd create, Edpuzzle would be then the vehicle that you use to push that video to the students. So once again, all of this is like, what's the goal you have for that video that you're presenting, and how can you use the tools you got to make it as accessible as possible to your students? Okay. All right. Okay. So those are some of the technical pieces of screencasting. We've talked about reasons you might want to do it instructionally, to make it so that your instruction pieces live on in ways that are a little bit more predictable and easy to control than trying to record out of a live session. Also, because it can be easier for students who need to catch up or get retaught to have things in smaller segmented chunks. Okay, so we talked about that. You also may consider having something that's relational in nature as opposed to instructional in nature. So something like the Monday morning message or the Friday afternoon send-off. Okay, so here's some best practices. Things to think about. All right, first of all, be willing to show your face. Okay, I know that some of us are self-conscious. I know that some of us don't love being on camera. I don't particularly know what that's like because I don't mind being on camera. But some people really do, and that's okay. If you are of the type who just gets a little bit self-conscious on camera, be advised, there's research that actually shows that a screencast meant to be instructional is more effective if your students can see you, if they can see your face, if they can see your hands moving, if they can see your facial expressions, if they can watch you be expressive, okay? Now, keep in mind that if you're having trouble with, and Christy may want to interrupt or chime in on this, but if you're having trouble getting the closed captioning feature to function right, there still is an opportunity for lip reading if you've got your camera on. I mean, I don't know how great it is, but it's something better than nothing, okay? If you're struggling with that and you know you have students who need it, okay? Also, you'll want to keep in mind that there's a certain, how do I say this? The camera has a subduing effect, okay? When you're in the classroom, I have seen teachers that have just big personalities. They're very expressive. They're kind of loud. They're energetic, all of these things. And then they turn the camera on and they're like, they're slow and they're calm and they're thinking a lot. And they're just not them. They're not the same, okay? The camera is going to have a calming effect because you're not live with your people anyway. So you're not drawing off their energy. So you got to kind of think about how you can be you and get your students to get what you're trying to give them through the little box. And so being a little bit over the top, you can see I fill up my box. I keep my box right underneath my camera. I'm using this as a prop. I'm filling it up with my hands. You can see when I was talking about multiple things, I was chopping along horizontally. Use that stuff. That's good stuff. That's the stuff that helps you convey your message. Okay. These people that just kind of click and talk and talk and click. If they taught that way, they would get some harsh feedback when they were being observed. Right? Because that's not very engaging, particularly if you're dealing with younger people, which we all are, okay? So I would say keep that in mind. Be expressive, show your face, be willing to use that as part of the experience, okay? Once again, you got to keep in mind the type of experience that students are used to flipping the screen on to see, okay? They're not often turning the screen on to be instructed, unless it's like somebody showing them how to beat a level in Minecraft, okay? There are those of us in the room, in the virtual Zoom room, who are people who turn on YouTube to be instructed, okay? Maybe I'll get curious about how, I don't know, something. What happened at the end of World War II? What was that scene like in wherever, so I'll turn on a YouTube video and I'll watch it. I'll watch 20 minutes of that. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying each of us has our thing and we're learners. We're learning people. We engage in learning stuff. And so we're used to sitting down and being taught something somewhat academic in nature. They're not. Kids aren't spending a lot of time doing that. Okay. They're watching people fall over on their skateboards. It's different. And so you have to kind of think that way when you go to do some screencasting. It's okay to be a little gimmicky, okay? It's okay to have segments. All right, segment 1. Andrew talks about something random. And let me tell you about a random thing I have next to me. This right here. Do you know what this is? I'll bet you don't know what this is, but I'll give you a clue to what this is. It goes on this hand. And look at, it's very thick. I could hold on to something very hot with this. What do you suppose? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you spend 60 seconds doing that at the beginning of an instructional video, you might draw better engagement that way. Okay? I'm not saying I guarantee it. I'm just saying some of your content is not going to carry a 10-minute video. And that's nothing personal. It's just sometimes we have to teach things that the students wouldn't choose to watch a video about. And I taught math. So there was a lot of things that I had to teach these students how to do. I had to teach them how to prove the Pythagorean theorem. None of them are going to type that into the search bar of YouTube and voluntarily watch that. So if I've got to record a video about that, then I've got to remember that I've got to bring something else to the table to make that video interesting to watch. Okay? Also, something to consider is if your students need particular things, okay? You got to think about the world that they're living in. So first of all, do they have special needs? Okay. Do they need closed captioning? Okay. Are you presenting with a lot of text on your screen? Like if you're doing slides, is there lots of text? Is that getting in the way? Okay. Are you going to do something that is going to be a problem if they're checking in on mobile? Remember, it's a littler screen. So like, it's that kind of stuff to think about, and just know the conditions on the ground that your students are experiencing. Okay, if you've got students who are hard of hearing, if you got students who you know are checking in on mobile because they're between homes and your school only gave them one Chromebook and the Chromebook stays at mom's, but they visit dad's sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Like those kinds of things. Just understand the conditions on the ground for your students. Okay. Also, keep in mind that a lot of these youngsters, the parents are listening to. And I don't mean that as like a threat or like something to be paranoid about. Sometimes it's really helpful that the parents are listening to. I'm just saying that just remember that you're not just talking to the kids, okay? You're talking to the parents too, and you're trying to make good impressions, and you're trying to give instructions that are really clear so that the students and the parents together can figure out what it is you're trying to do, okay? So keep that stuff in mind. Also, you want to think about not being too busy. And the reason that I say that is when it comes to students visualizing things, be advised that sometimes going into presentation mode or using a tool like QuietTube to show a YouTube video, or bringing up a tool like Jamboard, which is a really simple look, right? These types of things as teaching aids during the video can sometimes help keep the focus of the video on what you want it to be, okay? And I'm not necessarily practicing what I preach here because what's going on behind me is very cluttered. I've got a bookshelf over there, and I've got an open door over there, and, you know, but you may decide to have like an artificial background that is just, there's just not much going on there, or set yourself up with like in a nice little corner so that you can hang things so that if you need to write on stuff, or it says, you know, welcome to Wednesday, September 9th, like that kind of stuff. Like, be advised that you want to make sure that you're driving the focus of this thing into the thing that you want it to focus on, okay? You're not giving the students all that much stuff to get distracted by as much as you're able. They exist in worlds where that's already there plenty enough, okay? Also, things like loading time, okay? If you're having to do a lot of clicking in a way that's going to load things, can you preload the tabs so that everything's already loaded, so that you can click over and not have to worry about waiting while the video's running, waiting for this thing the little circle to spin and all that other stuff, okay? Kind of pre-think your sequence so that you can keep the tempo up, so you can keep the distraction down, okay? Try your best not to get so wound up on editing, that you start spending tons and tons of time making videos. You want to, as much as possible, make as many one-take videos as you can. And the reason for that is editing takes a long time. It will take, if you're recording a 7-minute video, that very likely, depending on the content and what you're really showing, might take you 10, 15 minutes of setup, 7 minutes of recording time, plus some clicking at the beginning and the end. And then if it's one take and it's done, aside from maybe chopping the beginning or the end, you could have that thing up and gone in a half an hour and it's done. If you are going to get into the editing game where you're chopping this and chopping that, and whoops, I didn't say that quite right, so I want to re-record this a little bit, and then you're going to be spending all your time editing videos, and we have better things to do than that. My friend taught a flipped class model. Now, just to give you some indication, a flipped class is basically when you present all the instruction, all the level 1 direct instruction asynchronously, even if you're all meeting face-to-face. And then the students consume it asynchronously before they come into class. And then you work with them on practice problems, on feedback sessions, on assessment. Okay, that's the flipped class model. And the reason they say flipped class is because the things we would ordinarily give at home as homework, we bring them all together to do together. And the things that we would ordinarily do all together, which would be the direct instruction, we send home for homework. So it's flipped. Okay. Not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what it is. And some people have found some success with it, and other people have struggled with it. So anyway, she did this. And so she was making these videos, and she was screencasting a lot of her direct instruction. And she would sit in an office just like mine, and she would record. And her husband would come in and need to get into the desk, or tell her that dinner's ready, or have a question because he just got a phone call about something. Okay, and he would do just what the 5-year-old did, okay? Except I'm not recording. Well, I am recording, but like we're live. We're all here together. So I could pause you, or I could send her away, or I could just say, hold on a moment. Yeah. No. No. I'll be up in a second. Like I can have that little conversation here and it's not the end of the world. Well, she used to chop all that stuff out. And then there was one time that she wasn't able to chop that out because she was so pressed for time. She was like, oh, he just came in real quick to ask something. It's no big deal. The kids won't even notice. And she posted it. Well, the kids noticed, and the kids loved it. They thought that he ended up being the coolest guy because he would show up about every 5th or 6th video, and it was totally authentic because none of it was scripted. And he became like a supporting cast member in the Flip Class sitcom. And he would show up, and they'd be like, oh, is Carl going to be in this video? Is Carl going to be in this video? And it drove their desire to want to watch the videos. And that's silly, but it worked. And she probably couldn't have made it work on purpose. It just worked because of the authenticity and the organicness of that little thing. And then he became a part of it. And my point in bringing that up is it can be difficult at times for your student, or for you to predict rather, it can be difficult for you to predict what your students are going to latch onto as far as the thing that makes your videos endearing to them, the things that makes your videos appealing, engaging. You know, chances are they're not going to be super well polished, especially at first. If you haven't done a lot of recording and you haven't heard your own voice and you haven't practiced the things that you're saying as far as making them stand alone as statements and resources, it takes some practice. It takes some getting used to. Okay, so your initial video creations are probably not going to be that great. They're not going to be that polished. You're going to stumble over your words a little bit. You're going to be a little bit nervous. You're going to put these things out there and want to qualify them after the fact because something didn't come out right. All of that's true. Okay, but some of that, in terms of things that happen during the videos that you would classify as imperfections, are going to be things that become gimmicks. So if you're like me and you notice that sometimes, I don't know if you've seen too many presentations that I've done, but it's not uncommon that I have a hat on. Okay, so maybe I wear a different hat in every video, and I have a lot of hats. And so I could get away with wearing a different hat for an entire semester, And that could just, it doesn't take a ton of like planning to figure out the thing. Okay. It just takes enough of creativity, of let's give this a shot, and all of that. Okay. With that, I mean, there's other things I could get into as well. I mean, things like, where's your camera at, right? You want your camera to be right at eye level if possible. Okay. You want to get used to seeing yourself on screen a little bit so that you can see like with a glare on your glasses. Like if you're someone who speaks with their eyes a lot, then this view is not a great view because you can't see my eyes at all. I look like Marcy from the Peanuts, right? I would need to drop down here so that you can actually see my eyes. And I have to be somewhat conscious of that. I move so much that I can't keep it consistently, but just being like aware of that kind of stuff. Be advised of your lighting. Okay. My room that I am in is very dark in the morning because that window faces south. So if I work with this light only and don't turn my overhead light on, my complexion is quite white. And so it like washes me out pretty good. Well, that's not the look really that I'm going for. So it's like some of that stuff is stuff that you want to think about too. Also, external mics are nice so that, like if Lego Mania is happening through that room right there, as is common, my kids can get a little loud at times, but you'd never know that because I've got an external mic here and it's only recording this distance from my voice to the mic. So some of those things, those production value type things are things to think about as well. And then this is the tip sheet that the Ingham ISD has put out. Tara built this. And it's just filled with all sorts of good information about things to think about. Keep your videos short. There's another one, show your face. Don't edit, it makes it real. Like some of those things that I mentioned, like you want to kind of think through that stuff. So this tip sheet is really quite high quality, and there's all sorts of little clickables in there as well.